My selfish family once kicked me out, and now they're demanding that I hand over my 3-bedroom house to my younger brother and his wife because they have kids, while I, being in my early 30s and single, do not. My brother, who's 29, already has 4 children. He became a dad at 22, then again at 23, then 25, and their newest baby just arrived recently. His wife and I don't get along at all. She loves to act like she's superior, then turns into a manipulative drama queen the second I stand up for myself. She can fake tears instantly and spin convincing sob stories that get almost everyone on her side. My parents and brother absolutely idolize her, even though they know exactly how toxic she is. They don't care. Sure, she's good-looking, but her personality is so rotten that there's nothing appealing about her. She refuses to get a job, even though she has a college degree. Instead, my mom spends her days watching the kids. That leaves my brother as the sole breadwinner, which is why they can't afford to live anywhere but at my parents' house. And let me tell you, that's a cramped, 3-bedroom home from the 1960s, definitely not ideal for a family of 6 plus my parents. Growing up, my brother was always the favorite. Even though we're only 3 years apart, I was constantly punished whenever I defended myself against his antics. He developed a superiority complex because of it. He always got the better treatment, unless extended family members stepped in and called out my parents, which they did pretty often. That favoritism was part of the reason my parents moved us far away, about 150 miles, so we rarely saw extended relatives except during holidays. My brother was physically abusive towards me at times, openly flirted with my first girlfriend until she dumped me, and made a joke out of every misfortune I faced. If I ever complained, my parents told me to toughen up. The only times I got fair treatment were when my parents had to put on a show in front of others. On birthdays or holidays, they'd pretend things were equal so nosy relatives wouldn't gossip. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. They even threatened to take away all my belongings if I dared to expose what was really happening. When I turned 18, I moved out before even finishing high school. I preferred sleeping on couches to living with them. My parents didn't even come to my graduation. At that point, I limited contact with them to holidays, just like everyone else. Fast forward to 2020, when the pandemic hit, I lost my job. With no steady income, I couldn't afford to renew the lease on the condo I shared with my roommate. He went back to live with his family, but I didn't have that option. I had to sell nearly everything I owned to downsize. Looking back, I regret living in a luxury condo I couldn't truly afford. I should have picked somewhere cheaper so I could have saved money. But I had a backup plan. I owned a truck and managed to buy a $1,000 camper in decent condition. I mounted it to the truck, planning to live there temporarily. That temporary solution lasted a lot longer than expected. I asked my parents if I could park my camper at their place. But since my brother's family already lived there, they claimed the house was too full. They said I could only park there if I paid rent equal to a local apartment rate. That was ridiculous. I was unemployed and trying to stretch my benefits. For that kind of money, I could have just rented an actual apartment. They called my camper an eyesore and told me to leave. My sister-in-law found my situation hilarious and mocked me endlessly. My brother chimed in, calling me a homeless bum. That first night, I parked in a store lot and tried to sleep. I was terrified someone would break in. Every safe spot I found, I eventually had to move. Sometimes random strangers harassed me, even claiming I was breaking HOA rules when I wasn't even near houses. I also had to sneak electricity from outdoor outlets just to keep my camper batteries charged. After months of that lifestyle, I finally landed a new job in a nearby city. At first, I parked in the back lot of the workplace where no one bothered me. Eventually, my boss let me disconnect the camper and park it permanently in a forgotten spot behind the warehouse. He even let me hook up to the building's power and water in exchange for me working Sundays for free. It wasn't glamorous, but I was safe, had electricity, and could shower at friends' places or at the gym. That job turned into a lifeline. I worked constantly, became close with the night security guard, and eventually earned a promotion to supervisor with better pay. I saved enough to buy a manufactured 3-bedroom home just 2 miles from work, on a small lot, but still perfect for me. I even set up my camper in the backyard as a backup. Once I moved in, I proudly shared the news online. That was my mistake. Somehow, my parents, brother, and his family figured out where I lived. They showed up unannounced one day and barged into my home as if they owned the place. My sister-in-law smirked the entire time, and I realized later why. It was all part of their plan. My parents kept commenting that my house was too big for one person without a wife or kids. My brother kept pointing out how close it was to his work. Then he pulled me aside and dropped the bomb. He wanted to move in with his family. His reasoning, I had too much space, and I could just live in my camper in the backyard. He also said I wouldn't be allowed to come and go without their permission. Rent, not even on the table. He said his family came first, and that was enough reason I should just hand over my house. That's when I secretly hit record on my phone. He didn't notice, and he rambled on until he tried to shake my hand to finalize it. I shouted hell no, loud enough to shake him. For the first time in years, I stood up to him without fear. I told him flat out, house isn't for sale or up for grabs. He got in my face, claiming I didn't deserve it because I didn't have kids. I laughed and told him I earned every inch of it. He argued I didn't need all that room. I pointed out that he never offered to pay rent, which meant I'd still be covering the mortgage while not being allowed to live in my own house. Right then, my parents and sister-in-law stormed back inside, ganging up on me and chanting, "Just do it for Jason." My sister-in-law screamed that she was pregnant and I was ruining her life. I told her she'd always disrespected me, so I owed her nothing. That set her off. She lunged at me and punched me in the face before Jason dragged her back. I raised my phone and told them I had everything recorded and would call the police if they didn't leave immediately. My parents tried guilt-tripping me one last time, saying I had a week to come to my senses. I told them not to come back. My sister-in-law stormed out crying theatrically, clutching her face as if she were the victim. In the end, I made it clear. I worked hard for my house, and I won't let them take it from me. My parents spoiled my brother into the entitled narcissist he is today, and they've never once explained why. Now they're furious that I finally stood up for myself. But this time, I have the evidence and the willpower to keep them out of my life. Not in the legal sense, but in an emotional one. After I kicked my parents, my brother, and my sister-in-law out for trying to force me into giving up my new house, I immediately jumped on social media and told the entire family what had happened. The post spread quickly, but you won't find it anymore since I eventually deleted it and set my profile to private. The reason I posted in the first place was because I knew my family's first move would be to twist the story and paint me as the villain. And I was completely right. But I had about an hour's head start before they got home, and I had video proof to back up every part of my story. No, I won't be sharing that video here, so don't ask. My early move paid off because within hours, plenty of relatives were siding with me. My dad, Jason, and my sister-in-law might have been planning their own version of events, but it was too late. The truth was already out. They still had a handful of loyal defenders, but not many. Most of the extended family already knew how entitled they were, so my side of things made perfect sense to them. One stranger even called me, telling me I was a terrible brother who should make space for a real family man. I hung up instantly and blocked the number. A week later, my parents returned with Jason, just like they'd threatened before. They rang my bell non-stop and banged on the door until I answered. I cracked it open, and they immediately tried to shove their way in. But I'd added chain latches and braced myself against the door. Jason and my father begged to come inside. I told them I was filming and would call the cops if they kept trying. My mother switched to her sugary sweet tone and asked if I was finally ready to let Jason move in. I told her and the rest of them to get off my property and never return. She burst into crocodile tears and asked why I couldn't just do this for my dear brother. I smiled and said flat out that I don't love Jason like a brother. He abused me for years, and they encouraged him. They're terrible parents, and he's an awful sibling. Then I warned them to leave before I called the police. Surprisingly, they did, though my mother's dramatic wailing echoed all the way down the street. I thought that was the end of it. But I should have known better. That Friday evening, I came home to see a moving truck and Jason's van in my driveway. He and his family were unloading boxes. Jason grinned and waved like nothing was wrong. I exploded and told them to stop. My sister-in-law smirked and said they were moving and whether I liked it or not. Then, in a mocking sing-song voice, she said, "It's okay because Mommy gave us permission, and you always have to listen to your mother." Her smug face made my blood boil. I stormed into my truck, locked the doors, and dialed 911. When they realized what I was doing, my sister-in-law pounded on my window, screaming at me to stop. She wailed that I couldn't do this to Jason because they needed the house. I shouted back, "Screw Jason, it's my house, not his." She then threatened to scratch up my truck if I kept calling, and the 911 operator overheard it. I told her if she did, I'd sue her, and thankfully she backed off. By the time the police arrived, Jason and his wife had locked themselves inside my home with their kids. I explained everything to the officers and showed my new driver's license with the correct address. When we went to the door, I noticed they had drilled out my front lock and swapped it for a new one. The broken lock, drill, and a set of bits were still sitting right there on the porch, basically gift-wrapped evidence. While I was explaining this, my parents pulled up. Immediately, they lied to the cops, saying I'd agreed to rent my house to Jason. I told the officers that was a blatant lie and easy to prove. Sure enough, Jason and his wife strutted out with a fake rental agreement. They were smiling like they'd pulled off a masterstroke. The lease had my forged signature on it, but anyone could tell it wasn't my handwriting. I told them this was obvious fraud, and if the cops investigated, it could land them in jail and maybe cost Jason his job. I warned them that if anything of mine was stolen or damaged, I'd hire a lawyer, press charges, and even call CPS. Jason went pale. My mom still begged me to let Jason's family stay, insisting I move into my camper instead. I shot back that if she thought it was such a good idea, she could hand her house over to Jason. The police separated us as the argument got heated. I told them Jason and his wife had committed multiple crimes, breaking and entering, property damage, fraud, forgery, even assault, since I had video of her hitting me. If they didn't leave immediately, I would press every charge. The only reason I hadn't already was because of their kids. Finally, my parents realized I wasn't bluffing. My mother whispered something to my sister-in-law, who broke into fake tears and ripped up the forged lease, tossing the pieces around like confetti. The cops weren't amused. They made her pick up every scrap. Jason then had to order his crying kids to load everything back into the truck. They put on the most pathetic guilt trip performance I've ever seen. The kids all did synchronized, begging faces. My sister-in-law stroked her pregnant belly like a tragic movie character, and Jason pleaded with me in his saddest voice. I didn't budge. I told them to keep packing and get out. Jason snapped, yelling that I was selfish for denying them a home. I laughed in his face and told him this wasn't sharing. He was just trying to take from me like always. The cops warned him to stop swearing or risk arrest. More squad cars showed up, doubling the number of officers. That finally scared my parents enough to leave. I demanded Jason hand over the keys to the lock he'd installed. Instead, he threw them into a storm drain. The cops made him fish them out, which left him filthy and seething. He slapped the keys into my hand, and I told them all to go and never come back. My mother threatened to disown me. I laughed and said, "Great, no more holidays where I get treated like garbage while Jason gets praised. And if he ever needs an organ donor, don't come to me." My parents went quiet, embarrassed in front of the cops. My mom broke down crying, while my dad clenched his fists but didn't dare act. They packed up in defeat. My sister-in-law had another tantrum on my lawn, but eventually they all left. My mother still tried bargaining, offering rent money, or suggesting I move in with them while Jason stayed here. I told her flatly that deals with them were worthless. I'd never live with them again, never take Jason's money, and never let him near my house. Before they left, I unloaded years of resentment in front of the cops. I reminded my parents how they refused to let me park my camper when I was homeless, how they mocked me, called me a bum, and always chose Jason over me. And now here they were trying to steal my house. I told them they'd always treated me like dirt, and now the entire family knew it. My dad's face turned red with shame, and my mom sobbed that she was a horrible person. I agreed. I told them they'd probably go to hell for what they'd done. They stood there, humiliated, while Jason avoided my eyes and loaded the last box. As soon as they were gone, I went back online and shared everything. This time, my parents didn't even try to spin it. The family overwhelmingly sided with me. Even the relatives who used to defend my parents were done with them. By Christmas, I was hosting relatives at my place, without my parents. Jason and his wife still live with them, and I saw online that my sister-in-law had her fourth baby in November. Her posts are full of passive-aggressive complaints about not having space. I know she's aiming those at me, but honestly, it's driving my parents crazy too. They're stuck in that crowded house with screaming kids, a manipulative daughter-in-law, their spoiled golden child, and a newborn. Maybe they should try living in a camper in their backyard and let Jason have their house. That would finally give them some peace. They could do it for Jason. That's all for now. This post ran too long, so part 3 will come later. And for those wondering, I will get security cameras soon. I just need to save up after buying my home. Doorbell cams will be my first purchase. And for those who think I should have had Jason and his wife arrested, the only reason I didn't was their kids. But if they try anything again, I won't be so forgiving. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a comment, hit subscribe, follow for more, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one.